We'll begin with the lone pine. It was a particularly nasty battle in Gallipoli where Australians were thrown in as a diversion to allow a British expeditionary force to land further down the peninsula, which they did, but then rather than taking advantage of the surprise they'd achieved and turning inland to cut off the Turks, they stopped and had a cup of tea, and by the time they were ready to move on, the Turks had reinforced and the sacrifice at Lone Pine was wasted. And that is a metaphor for most of the First World War. Like, subscribe and comment. I think we forget just how the world has changed in the last 150 odd years. This garden commemorates the short lives of many unnamed children. That's got to tell you something. And the memorial I'll show you in a minute was created by Keith Smith and donated by the penguin community back in 2018. It stands above this, on the top of this post. It's a whole globe made up of children's stick figures. Not all the children were unnamed, but there was an awful lot of kids died. Now this is a memorial to Lloyd Robinson, who was apparently an historian. His good lady wife had this sculpture done. Now the sculptor points out that there's an awful lot of work gone into this. I'm not sure where, but it's supposed to be an homage to his historical roots as an Englishman and as someone who was excited by Stonehenge. Well, there you go. These old cemeteries are quite painful at times. There's an awful lot of these children back before polio and all the other vaccines we've got. Who knows what she passed from, but she did. I'm sure all these loss of children affected people. You got John Thomas there, 1877 to 1955. Alice from 1880 to 1971. Kathleen, 1908 to 84. But above is Jessica, 1913 to 1918. Another 5-year-old gone. And without being too depressing, here's another one, 13 months. It was a different time. Give you some idea of the scope of the place. Penguin's a small town, really. There's a lot of interesting graves here. There's another one of these kiddies' graves. Age 1 year and 3 months, I think that says. A little bit sad that too, because we had a lot of prisoners of war after Singapore and Greece and Crete. So close to the end of the war too, and only 28. And you'd be very surprised if this didn't happen here. Every town in Australia had this happening. You see James Owens passed away 1897, but underneath was Leslie John Owens, son of the above, killed at Gallipoli, August 1915. So he wasn't one of the first in, but he was what they used to call the fair dinkum. The ones who knew what was coming and still signed up. And lest we forget, this wrought iron, or cast iron rather, framings over the graves was quite popular 100 odd years ago, maybe a bit longer, 1890s. We'll work our way over to what looks like a cenotaph up there. Another one that went too early, Janet, wife of J.H. Ellis, John Henry it turns out. Passed in 1909 at the age of 40, and he lived on till 1953. Yeah. Not a good year to be in your middle age as a woman. Margaret Eugenie Ballantyne, age 36. Her husband lived on till 43. Nothing quite like going through an old cemetery to realise how much the life expectancy's improved. See there, George passed away at the age of 65. His good lady wife went on to 101 years. And looks like his brother went on to 91. So it was always a lottery, it always is, I guess. These ones I find touching. So Catherine passed away on the 23rd of December 1901, and her husband bundied off 26th of May 1902, less than 6 months later. And their daughter only lasted another 10 years on that. Their son lived to be 69 though, so you know. And they had another daughter that made it to 73. It's just so scattered and random. Member of the 2nd 9th Armoured Regiment, Second World War trooper. Lived till 1961, but still was only 56 when he passed. All those wars and poor diet had effects on people. No age on this one. Neil Lillico. Next door we have Valerie Lillico. And next to Valerie, her husband Andrew. Now I mention this because there's a Lillico beach over towards Devonport. I just wondered what the connection is. If you know, drop a comment. Have a long gap there between the passing of the good lady wife and the husband, 1918 to 1944. It's a long time to be in that sort of mourning. Here's another one of these smaller plots. I can't really, yes I can, age 7. Ellen Drew, I believe. Well, also there's 7 children between 1874 and 1891. Working our way around the cenotaph, we'll get to it before we go. It stretches out to the corner there. Another touching tragedy, I guess. Kids would have lost both their parents within a year, but he passed in October 1913 and she in June 1914. So Gwendolyn Gladys Kane died as a 4.5-year-old, which was really sad. But her parents both lived to be 93. It's a long time to carry that sort of pain. Deceased is deceased, but it is nice to have them all together. Joseph, Sarah, Elizabeth and Martha, all in the same plot. Nice old couple together. Another one of the sad ones. 3-year-old daughter and then a 17-year-old son. Not all of the grave markers have survived as well as you would have liked, I guess, when they were put in. Joseph had a fair run, 98 years. Now this one tells a tale. Margaret passed away on the 7th of May 1924 at 43 years of age, and Daphne, daughter of the above, on the 10th of May 1924, aged 9 years. Very strange that they went within a few days of each other. Story here, Robert Lancaster, 74 years old when he passed, lost a daughter who was aged 5, another daughter who was aged 5, and then a son killed at Messines Ridge in Flanders during the First World War. His wife lived on to 1935. Oh, the pain some people have lived with. Quite a monumental stone here. Probably one of the tallest in the cemetery. Bella and James Hall. Okay, so I know there was child mortality. So Charles and Rachel, they lived to a fair age. Lost a daughter on the 2nd of the 10th, 1898, aged 10. And their son was killed in action on 4th of September 1916 as a 25-year-old. You just wonder. I think it's time to approach the cenotaph. So we have the Rising Sun hat badge. This face we have memory of Walter Henry William Rosethorn, Sergeant in the Penguin Light Horse, 12th Battalion AIF. It's a real shame the light horse were dismounted and made to fight on foot in France. But 7th of April 1917, 1930, he was 35. And actually a cenotaph, it's just a memorial to a fallen sergeant. These are other family members that are buried here as well. It appear to be the good sergeant's parents. Quite an impressive memorial. Let's go around and see if I can get the lone pine in with it. There you go. The good Sergeant Rosethorn, lone pine in the background, and then Penguin Beach behind him. Nice place to stop. Another in our series on older cemeteries. This one only goes back to 1922 or thereabouts. We'll go for an explore. Before chapels were built at cemeteries, there's a place you can park the hearse in case the weather's off. Well, I'm not sure if it has any meaning, but it's an octagonal shaped building, not dissimilar to the early Orthodox churches of Byzantium, but there you go. Let's hit the gravestones. And as happens with these older ones and larger ones, it's divided by denomination. And here we have Thomas Wilson, died in 1927, and his Mrs. Juanita died in 1967. That's a full 40 years, almost 40 and a half years after Tom. And there's a certain regularity to the style. 1920s, I guess people were starting to avoid the buoyant and effusive type grave markers. Bit of a view over the cemetery. It's not overly large, considering it's for Devonport, which was the 4th city at the time. What does surprise me at this early stage, yet to see an Anzac grave, which is unusual in this part of the world. You can see what I mean by the regularity of the grave markers. There's some variation in the headstone styles, but the plots themselves are very definitely regular in shape and design. And in complete contrast to the earlier one we were looking at, Martha died in 1940 and then Charles in 42. Yeah. Now this one's a little odd. You can see the nameplates fallen off the back there. If we zoom in, you'll see that it's in, I believe it's Chinese. The very first one I've seen on the North West, and somewhat segregated from the rest of the cemetery. People were funny. People still are funny, I guess. And as you can see, there aren't that many that stick out above your standard. There is one up there, which we might go and have a squiz at. We have the funeral urn draped in a shroud, and the plinth in loving memory of Julia Pierce, died 1926 at 75, and William Pierce, Died 1930, age 85. I have no reason, I have no explanation as to why this one's so big. Just spy the back of one over there, which has been interesting in other cemeteries. That was in the other cemeteries, that pattern was for children. This is for someone who was that 31, 1923. No cause of deaths, just people die, I guess. It was only a matter of time, I guess. Charles Ernest Hannum, accidentally killed on March the 29th, aged 14 years and 10 months. There are stories here. It's taken a little while, but here we have Jacob Morley, died 1924, and also in loving memory of Louis, their son, killed in action in France in August 1918. So very close to the end. And then Louis's mum, Anne, who lived until 1944. It had an effect across so many families. Now this one's in memory of Charles Henry Norton, 1st of August 1926, as a 21-year-old. The clue might be that it was erected by the members, players and supporters of the Devonport Football Club, which would suggest that he was a member and a player. He's a 21-year-old, and it is the middle of the season. So who knows what happened there. You know, drop a comment. I'll have a bit of a dig through Trove as well. And we have here one of the shield shapes from the 20s, as it turns out, not the 40s as I once thought. Albert Foster Leake, born 1906, died 1928. Thy will be done, yeah. Impressive piece of marble. Now there's one of an unusual design. We might go and have a look at that. We are, after all, in the Anglican section, so not surprising that there'd be a cross. It's unusual to have the name markers laid on the sides like that. In loving memory of Arthur Capelin Hall, District Surveyor of Devon, 1898 to 1935. Died August 25th, 1935, aged 69. There's his good lady wife Laura, who died at 64 in 1942. It's Devon. You will note that we are at the Devonport General Cemetery. The thing is, Tasmania was split up into 18 counties, all named after English counties. It was the most English copying of all the colonies. I'll put a link to the info on that in the notes. And here we have one of the official AIF plaques. William Toll, 1st Australian General Hospital. He would have seen much unpleasantness. But he did live through the war and passed away during the next one. Definitely Anglican, sheltered by the Rock of Ages. Minnie Kenny was 74 in 1950 and Stephen was 82 and 53. But also remembered their grandson, Kenneth O'Mara of Botany Bay, New South Wales. Died as 7-year-old in 31. Very strange that it was still called Botany Bay. There you go, and their daughter Lucy Muckridge, who made it to 79. Now this is Private Olsen, 26th Battalion, who passed away in 49, but if you look at the top there, next to the word private, it has the number 15, the 15th person to sign up for the AIF. Wow. You would have seen some action, particularly when we compare the number with Sapper Charles Bilson, 5499. The first tunnelling company he would have seen. Wow. they laid mines and whatnot under the opposition's trenches. Late of Waratah, lest we forget. Lest we forget indeed. No mention of a partner here, but there you go. Sarah Grace, youngest daughter of the late Charles and Mary Huntington. Now Sarah was 59 when she left. One would imagine she had been married with a change of surname like that, but who's to know? Another little conundrum. Okay, so we've got William Douglas, dropped off in 1949 at 82. I'd imagine it's his brother Charles, 71 in 49 as well. And then Susanna, wife of William, who made it to 103. So that means she'd have been born in 1861. Wow. Would have been a fair way out of town when this cemetery was set up. It's now very much in an industrial area. Okay, so in loving memory of our dear mother Elsie May, relicit of the late A.T. Morley, who died in she'd passed away in 43. I'm not sure what a relicit is. I must have a squiz. I'll put the results in the show notes below. And here we have another one standing out from the mass of graves. Doesn't appear to be anyone of any particular note. James Thomas Maloney and Violet Elizabeth Maloney. He passed in 47 at 52, she passed in 76, nearly 30 years later at 81. I guess that's impressive. A few more on this side of the main path. We've got a little bit more difference about them. We'll go for a walk. 1053, Private William Barnes, 26th Battalion. Only made it to 1929. There seem to be a lot more 26th Battalion here, and I haven't seen any of the 20th or the 60th. There must have been a recruiting boundary. And as I say, it's an industrial, that's the council depot over the back there. The light industrial area of Devonport. Here's one of the simpler ones. Loving memory of Henry Thomas Moore, loved husband of Helen. Died the 17th of December 1931, at the age of 56. Simple, but touching. A little bit of extra design work in the top left corner there. But Alan passed away in 32 at 57, and then Minnie joined him in 76, 54 years later, as a 92-year-old. She should have been in her 40s when Alan bundled off. People's lives. Okay, another relicit. Kate, relicit of the late Thomas Cotton. Died the 6th of December 1949. I really have to find out what that word means. Now, in all those graves that I've walked by, here and the other places, there are very few that are still visited by the looks of them. Some are. Just wonder what it says about us. Probably says we're a highly mobile population that changes where we live quite often, and so we don't have the time to get back. And that's a photograph of the deceased. Okay, so Hedley Bratton passed away on the 2nd of January 63 as a 49-year-old, late of the RAAF. And then his good lady wife. As age 96, together at last. They don't have a date for Jessie. Remember in one of the other cemetery episodes I was talking about how you don't see names anymore. that often. Certainly Cyril, and definitely Wynyard as a first name, or a Christian name if you like. Middle name in this occasion. You don't see those very often at all these days. In fact, I have never recalled anyone called Cyril. F.W. Rutherford, 2nd 14th Infantry Battalion. So he was part of the 2nd AIF. Not sure which division the 14th was attached to. But he made it to corporal. And again, he was only 48 when he bundied off in 55. I just wonder what people have been through. We have a Tasmanian gunner, Second World War, from the army number there, TX 6704. Gunner Stevens from the 56th Composite Anti-Aircraft Regiment, Royal Australian Artillery. Made it to 64 as a 62-year-old. Dearly loved and sadly missed by wife Ada, as one would imagine. That was in 64, and Ada joined him in 1988. 26 years. And even an officer, Lieutenant George. Doesn't say which infantry battalion, just infantry battalion. Someone else who passed in the 60s, age 66. Second World War veteran. His age gaps fascinate me. Francis George Keating passed away in 1965, and his good lady wife Kathleen in 2010. What's that, 45-year difference. It's truly long time to be without that person you love. And we have a section here for child graves that I won't disturb too greatly. But this one for Stephen Rodman is still well attended and looked after. He passed away in 1966. Yeah. That's a tough one. Joseph and Sarah, both buried in Devonport, but Joseph came from Macclesfield and Sarah from Bury, or Bury, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, in England. Finish off with this one. It's Charles Ramsey, loving husband of Alice, who died in 1923 at 61. Then Alice 13 years later at 77. And then Alan Ramsey, son of the above, in 68 as a 78-year-old. With the sun shining on it, it's quite an impressive stone. The lead work's still in. Very nice way to finish up, I think. We're at Latrobe General Cemetery today. It's still in use, but at this end of the paddock it appears to be the older stuff, and we'll have a look there because I find it's more respectful to go at the older stuff and it tells more of a story. Start off with these couple. The marker is missing from the one on the right, obviously. This is in loving memory of James Cummings, 1922 as a 61-year-old. But at the other end of the grave, very nice little touch, Dad. And we're definitely in the pre-antibiotic, mostly pre-vaccine period. We've got Robert Purdy, who passed away in 1945 as a 66-year-old, and also Florence, daughter of the above, died the 10th of December 1924, aged 3. So we've kicked off with the tragedy. Of course, in some ways every death is a tragedy, but the younger just seems even more so. Some sort of relation, I guess. Mary Cumming from the ones up the road, 20th of December 1924 as a 60-year-old. Not good just before Christmas. I mean, you miss people mostly at Christmas anyway, but have their anniversary just beforehand. Etty Mary Mora, More. 5th of December, another one, just before Christmas, age 42. But again, another nice touch. Mum, Ada Mary, beloved daughter of NW Parker, 2nd of February 1931, age 4.5. I am sure we'll get on to people that have lived longer, just that seems to be the go at this end. And almost on cue. Fella passed away in 9th of April 1889 as a 49-year-old, and his missus in 1934 as a 79-year-old. That was Sarah Duke, and that was George Duke. I like these older ones that are still maintained. It means there's still a connection. So Kathleen Nurse Walker, 20th of April 1930 as a 21-year-old, but the grave is still very well maintained. And these are her parents, James Robert Walker and Jessie Mary Walker, who lived through to the 50s and 60s. We have it much easier nowadays. Carry on the theme of how much easier we have it. Not that child deaths don't occur now, they're just not as often. So Frida F., beloved wife of H.A.W. Dawson, died Anzac Day 1927, age 42. A year and a day after Francis Davidson, age 4 days. You just wonder if there's a connection. And our first Anzac grave, I think that's 7175, Sapper Charles Knight. So he was an engineer, the 3rd Tunnelling Company, passed away in 1936. And you know this is an official headstone because down here on the corner it says Office of Australian War Graves. Alterations not permitted without approval. This next little section has a lot of the cast iron fencing around the graves. So we'll see what they've got to say for themselves. Quite an impressive family plot here. Our dear sons Jack, 2-year-old in 1913, 14-year-old in 1921, and a 36-year-old in 1928. So that's Jack, William and Herbert, and James, their father, who passed away in 1938 as a 76-year-old, and their mother, Emma Elizabeth, in 1948 as an 80-year-old. Oh, some people do it tough. Somewhat more straightforward. The cross is broken off and is now standing against the plinth. But Annie Shirley died the 21st of August 1910 as a 63-year-old, which would have been about the life expectancy in those days. Very nice cast iron surroundings. A little bit of work on the corners there just to give it a touch of something. Now we've seen this style of headstone before. So this one's for Alan Arthur Boatwright, who died the 1st of June 1911 as a 28-year-old. And then Alfred, father of the above, in 1930 as an 86-year-old, and Fanny, his wife, 1931. And this would appear to be their son, Alfred Thomas Boatwright, who passed away in 54 as an 80-year-old. So someone made it through. Unfortunately, this headstone's fallen forward, and I won't get in and move it, one because it's too heavy, and two because I believe it's an offence to interfere with a grave by doing so. Now this is interesting. You've got the old cast iron, and the bits that have been broken off have been replaced, which is a nice touch. Difficult to read, this one. Louise Whittaker, beloved wife of William Alexander Whittaker, who died sometime in October 1887, at the age of 23. More probable than not, it was childbirth in those days. Now this is a difficult one for James Gower. Died New Year's Eve 1926 as an 83-year-old. And he's beside Charlotte, his wife I imagine, who died in 1887 as a 42-year-old. That's a bit of a swing. Maybe it's their son, she's his mother. I suspect not though. Series of cast iron surrounds here. Stone on this one. And next door we have Henry William something Retford, I think. Retford. Died in 1886 as a 31-year-old. 31 years and 6 months. It's really worn away, but then it has been over a century. Now this one appears to be in a different sort of stone, sandstone maybe, or granite, not sure. But it's Thomas and Isabella Thompson. Thomas was 73 in 1880, and Isabella 75, maybe 1890. Again, it's hard to tell with the wearing on the stone. Our first crest-shaped headstone for W. Biggins, age 57. No year though that I can see. And as you can see, this one's tipped over and the top portion of the memorial is missing. On the steps there it says, "Sacred to the memory of Annie Allen." But underneath it has, she was widow of the late Edward Allen, who died in 1907 at 76, and son-in-law of the above, who died in 1905 at 68. Very odd, don't see that often. The son-in-law in with the wife, but there you go. Of Matilda, beloved wife of Humphrey Brown, who died on the 27th of May 1925, and of Humphrey Brown, who died on the 15th of November 1925. She was 66 and he was 70. Couldn't live without her, it would appear. This one's pretty straightforward, and they're somewhat wearing their faith on their sleeves. Elizabeth Fowlam, a Christian, fell asleep in Jesus in 1875 as a 65-year-old. Dorcas Watkins, fully trusting in her Saviour, aged 36 in 1876. Amy Dorcas, February the 12th, 1878, 18 months. Richard Charles Phelan, May the 11th, 1905, as a 74-year-old. And then Eliza McCall on the 19th of May, 1906, as a 34-year-old. Some very nice, well, almost standard cast iron work now, from what I can see in this cemetery. There's one over the back there with the same pattern you can see over there, that we'll get to in a minute. And you can see the same pattern on this one that was directly behind the last one we looked at. And that's Robert Wright, who died in 1884 as a 76-year-old. But very nice, simple but effective cast iron surroundings. Another two with the same cast iron surroundings. This is James Davidson, who died in March 1886 as a 33-year-old. This is James Anderson, died in 1885 as a 56-year-old. And then his good lady wife, who passed away in 1924 as a 97-year-old. That's a big gap, 24 and 17. 34, 41 years. It's a long time. Now this is a variation on that cast iron pattern, but it's twice the height and has a gateway, although the gate is long gone. You can see the fittings there for it. Out of this is that this is for Elizabeth, the beloved wife of R.J. Purdy, 1882 maybe, but quite an impressive piece of stonework. All the way there, there's a I suspect a piece missing as well, probably a cross. Quite an impressive piece of cemetery furniture. Simpler form of cast iron without those little arrowheads. The work on the stone there, and this is sacred to the memory of Frances, wife of John Elmer, and she was 72 when she died in 1876. Another fallen marker. This one is just impossible to read, I suspect. No, that's the front of it. You can see there's a little bit of decorative work at the top, but it's so worn away. You would have to go to the archives to find out who. Variation on the spear tops. And then we get to the corner. There's a nice little turned item there. And the gate is still extant, which is very nice. No is very difficult. William Mitchell and Margaret Mitchell. He died at 52. She died at 68. But the years there are almost impossible to decipher without getting in and scrubbing it. And again, I'm not going to interfere with someone else's grave. Here we go. Strap in. Robert Douglas Bald, accidentally drowned on November the 7th, aged 7 years and 7 months. And Victor Bald died of diphtheria on the 6th of December 1880, aged 7 years and 4 months. And Wilfred, 15th of January 1880, I think that is, aged 6. Wow, painful. The average age was much lower in the 19th century, obviously. Average life expectancy. Alexander Foster Hogg, 1875, as a 50-year-old. And then Sarah, his missus, on the 5th of June 1889 at age 70. Yeah. Here we have Frances Bonney, wife of Elias Boss. 14th of August 1874 as a 38-year-old. So 1836 or thereabouts. Again, the hand-holding motif. Emma Bramich died in 1886 as a 51-year-old. Husband William in 1904 as a 73-year-old, but holding hands again. Again, the cross missing from the top, and a variation on the hand. This one's holding a wreath, holding a document, and this is in loving memory of Elizabeth King, the wife of David King, and she passed away in 1894 as a 65-year-old, which is about average, I think, for those days. When we get over to that section, we'll be very careful. Those are those widowmaker branches that just drop because it's a day ending in Y. It jars to our sensibilities, and no doubt it was difficult for those who loved William Aird, who died as a 28-year-old in 1892. But younger deaths were far more common in those days. Again, we have the hand-holding imagery. So this is Robert Milburn, who died in 1890 as a 60-year-old, and his good lady wife Caroline, 1907 as a 64-year-old. And then down the bottom we have a plaque here, so I suspect ashes have been added. Glenn Carroll Strobel in 2023, and Benno Strobel in 2009. So I assume they're descendants. Would make no sense otherwise. And he's got the simplified arrowheads, but no gate. This one's for William Riley of Tarleton, Tasmania, 1888, age 60. This is a really old cemetery we have here. And some motif at the top that's worn away. Just make out that it's Rose Anna, wife of John Smith, in the year of something. and the rest is just worn away. But the mark is still standing, and I quite like the patination of the lichen on top. One again is another one of those painful ones. Leslie Larder Wakeham, who departed this life on the 12th of October 1877, aged 12 months and 3 days. Next to Marion Ultra Turnbull, 1881, aged 8. Yeah. Again, we've got the simplified arrowheads and no gate. This stone has really stood up well to the years. In loving memory of Mabel Mary Mitchell, who died August the 8th, 1879, aged 3 months and 3 weeks. Quite a nice headstone, and well protected over the top with almost a roof over it. In memory of Frances Going Pennyfeather, eldest daughter of the late Richard Pennyfeather of Ballynyra in County Tip, Ireland. February the 11th, 1884, as a 59-year-old. A lot of Irish migration to Australia. Again, rather difficult to read this one because, as you can see, it's well worn away. But continuing the theme of the cast iron spear points, and still upright, so at least there's that. Again, those simplified spear points, but no headstone in this plot. Okay, another one of the granite sandstone, I think, by the way it's worn, with the book at the top. I assume that's supposed to be the Bible. And then we have the painting refilled, the lettering, and the painting has highlighted the lettering, but only some of it. In loving memory of Sarah Ann Richards, July 11, 1884, as a 16-year-old and 4 months. She was lovely to look on, sweet, gentle and mild. Fair was her person, still fairer her mind. The pride of her parents, beloved by all around her. I can't read the rest, I'm sorry. Unmarked child's grave, and an unmarked, maybe a child, maybe an adult. It's hard to know, people were shorter then. Again, we have the cast iron, and this is the Wheatleys. Well, you can see there's a lean to the headstone, so thankfully we've got here before it collapsed. Lavinia Jane, wife of MD Heatley, 1884. Marshall Wheatley, son of the above, 1880. Ralph Wheatley, 82. Douglas Wheatley, 1885. Raymond Wheatley, 1889. And Constance, 1891. Good heavens. There's been some attempt to at least keep this headstone together. It's for Mona Lyle, loved wife of Vincent Graham, who departed on the April 4th, 1887, as a 23-year-old. Again, you'd have to think that might have something to do with childbirth. Okay, so we've got Morris Oakley Phillips, who died in 1950 as an 84-year-old. And then at the end of his plot, we have to the memory of Elvie Ethel, 2nd of October 1905 through to 1990. Daughter of Carol and Maurice, fair enough. Wife of Harry Olaf Emmanuel Lindquist, mother of Roy Philip Lindquist, later wife of Alan Joseph Greaves and mother of Alan Anthony Greaves. Peace. And on the next plot over, This is to the memory of Henry Phillips, June 23, 1903, as 68-year-old. And Jane, eldest daughter of Henry and Emily Phillips, who died on the 3rd of September 1884 as a 24-year-old. So with those two graves there, we've gone from 1831 through to 2023. Here we are under those dangerous trees. We'll just have a look quickly. This is the Coles, Thomas Henry, who passed at 23 in 1903, and also his father in 1930, I think, maybe 34, it's hard to tell, as an 81-year-old. You can see in there's some broken headstones and whatnot, and a fallen branch. So I'll just give that little area a miss. Variation on the cast iron theme. Got the arrowheads, fleur-de-lis, I guess you call them, at the top. But the circle work there underneath. This one's in loving memory of David Palmer, 1898 as a 52-year-old. Nice impressive piece of stonework. And immediately behind David is Ruby Mary, the daughter of C&E Goodwin, died 25th of April 1917, aged 26. And Oscar Ernest, 7th son of the Goodwins, on the 15th of March 1904 as aged 5 months. And also our beloved second daughter, 1919. By golly, some people do it tough. To be broken like that on purpose, carved that way. Something rules the storm, God rules the storm. So this is sacred to the memory of Gracie Victoria, beloved wife of Captain Hollyman, who departed this life on the 9th of August 1885 as a 22-year-old. Not lost, but gone before. A lot of maritime images there. Assume she was lost at sea. Just been me making connections that aren't there. Could have been because he was a sea captain. And inside the same enclosure, this one again has a gate that would have had a gate but is now missing. This is for Florence Frances Louisa Young, 23-year-old in 1888, but no more information. And on the northern face, it's also to the memory of Frederick Young and Mary Jane Young, 1884 and 1917. I assume they were the parents of Florence Frances Louisa Young. And on the western face, which explains why the compound here is so large, this is sacred to the memory of Mary Jane, beloved wife of William Alfred Gollard. She departed life in 1908 in her 52nd year. This is the bit that got me. After 30 years of close union and happy married life. Wonderful to put it up there. A loving mother and a good true wife. A good a place as any to end part 1 of this quite extensive early cemetery from Tasmania, from the northwest no less. Stand by for part 2 in a couple of weeks. Okay, we're back in Latrobe Cemetery for part 2. Just catching up with where we were last time. If you found these to be of any interest, please like, subscribe and comment. Okay, this is where we finished off part 1, to the memory of Mary Jane Collard. After 30 years of close union and happy married life. A loving mother and a good true wife. And again we've got the cast iron with the fleur-de-lis and the imitation of turned wood but in cast iron corners. In loving memory of my dear husband Thomas C. Taylor. You've got the male and female hands clasped at the top. But she never made it to the same plot, or if she did, she's not marked on the gravestone. So who knows what happened there. This grave is for John Dalting, 1923, as a 69-year-old. And behind him, across the way a little bit, are the newer style for cremations. Might have a closer look when we get over there, but they're very recent, so I don't want to interfere on anyone's feelings or memories. Another memorial affected by movement over time. Looks like C.A. Mansfield, but no other information. Obviously something missing from the top, probably a cross. A few more markerless graves, and who knows what's been going on there. We're moving forward in time through this little section. A lot less of the cast iron, just the one over there that you can see over yonder, but the rest are straightforward, more your standardised stone and concrete and whatnot, all with the same sort of basic pattern surrounding the plots. But we'll have a look, see if there's anything interesting. This is for James Gorman, subtitled A Faithful Priest, 1927 he passed, and you can see that there's still artificial flowers being added to his site. We have Clara and George Bramich, husband and wife and husband. She bundled off in 35 as a 70-year-old, and he 2 years later as a 72-year-old. You can see that we're starting to head into the 20th century now. So that's why there's a sameness to these. There seemed to be an egalitarianism attached to graveyards from the 30s. It's the site for the cremations, with some parrots out the front still bringing life. There they go. This is the unutilised side. Each one of those alcoves will be a container for ashes, and then a plaque goes over the top. Now then, we have a couple of Sisters of Mercy here, an Irish order that for my sins and theirs we came in contact with each other for the first 3 years of my education. Not these nuns, but at St Bridget's, funnily enough. This was Mother Mary Aloysius Martin, who died in 1899, and Sister Mary Agnes Byrne, who died in 1938. Very simple little marker, as one would expect. And next to them is Mother Mary de Sales Dooley, fine Irish name, died in 1932. Sometimes when a headstone comes down we get lucky and it gets preserved. And this is for Thomas Lee and Michael Lee. Thomas is a 38-year-old in 1910, and Michael Lee is an 84-year-old in 1914, but still preserved headstone, very nice. More of the cast iron with the spear points rather than the fleur-de-lis, and a nice iron cross, but no names. Another one with the fleur-de-lis, but again no names. Quite impressive amount of ironwork in this cemetery. Okay, this is for Henry Shaw, who died on the 21st of January 1912. On the eastern face, facing the sun in the morning. Another Henry, and Kate, wife of Henry Shaw, who died in 1928 as a 75-year-old. On the northern face, I don't know if you can see that, that's Private John G. Shaw, son of the above, who gave his life at Gallipoli on August the 7th, 1915, aged 25. There's nothing like these older graves to remind us how important modern medicine is. So this is in loving memory of James Arnold, son of James and Kate Lowry, who died the 14th of April as a 14-year-old. And then James himself at 69, and Mabel, who died in 1885, aged 3 months. Elsie, who died in 1894 as an 8-year-old. And Kate Lowry, wife of the above, who died in 1934, aged 72. This one's a bit different. It has a funeral urn on the top. Nice circular column. It's in loving memory of my dear husband, Daniel James Conran, I think, who died in October 1908 as a 41-year-old. And no one else here with him. Okay, there's a lot not said here. Agnes, not sure what the surname is. August 26, 1902, aged 34 years. Also Llewellyn and John, infant sons of the above. There's so much not said there. Now this one would have been quite impressive in its day. You can see it's got quite a few layers of stonework as well as the cast iron. But the headstone is almost impossible to read. Hopefully not everyone died young. That's Martin Collins in 1896 as an 88-year-old. And Mary, what's that, 11 days later as a 78-year-old. Couldn't live without him. Nice, relatively simple piece. This is in loving memory of Mary, beloved wife of Isaac, who died in 1898 as a 68-year-old. And then Isaac lived on to 93, passing in 1914. This is an odd one. Donovan Patrick, born County Cork in brackets, England, 1849. Accidentally drowned at Latrobe in 1859. And Mary, born in London, 1878, passed away in 1897, aged 19. County Cork, England. Not sure about that one. We're back in the 1800s again, the 1890s to be specific. And this is in loving memory of my dear daughter Mary Jane, wife of James Bryan, who died in October the 26th, I think that is, in 1892, aged 37, and their infant baby. May their souls rest in peace. I suspect that that's another one of those deaths in childbirth. Quite an ornate and impressive piece of marble, this one. It's in loving memory of my dear wife Kate, April 1918, devoted to God, her husband and children. Interesting. Anyway, erected by her sorrowing husband, Captain L. Falkland, late Indian Army, and children. There you go. Empire. Okay, you don't know what effect the war had on a lot of people, but there are a lot of them that didn't live past the 1920s. So this is William Watson, who met his death on Soldiers Settlement, Whiteford Hills, on the 21st of May 1922, aged 34, and who served as a sergeant in the AIF. RIP, lest we forget. I have here a sizable obelisk with a cross on top, Celtic cross by the look of it. There's some wrought iron, cast iron work around the bottom, and at least two faces with memorials on. So let's go and have a look. Appears to be for the Dooleys. James, who passed away on the 5th of February 1891 as a 70-year-old, and his good lady wife Alice on the 17th of August 1887 as a 59-year-old. And then off to the southern side, this would appear to be their children. George, who passed away in 1888 as a 26-year-old. Mary Ann in 1861 as a 13-year-old. And Rose in 1914 as a 65-year-old. On the north face, we have James Joseph Dooley, who died in 1910 as a 53-year-old. William in 1928 as a 74-year-old. Hannah Mary Dooley, knee council. Relict, that means widow in an archaic form, in 1933 as a 73-year-old. Some nice subtle carving on the stone here, which is sacred to the memory of Margaret Bremich, wife of Joseph Bremich, passed in 1883. This stone's standing up really well. And Martha Murray, youngest daughter of the above, and beloved wife of the late Captain John Murray, 1905 as a 46-year-old. There's untold stories in there. There's another unusually shaped headstone, but still in good nick for the 1880s. It's to the memory of Bridget, the beloved wife of James Herrick, who died January the 15th, 1883 maybe. He's a 44-year-old. But that stone's in really good condition. Sitting quietly all on his own is William Bannon, late of Longford. Don't know whether that's Longford Town or somewhere in County Longford. 1904, so born in 1824 or thereabouts. Oh, we reach back a long way in cemeteries. And with William Bannon, we'll call it stumps for today. That's the end of part 2. There's another older section, judging by the cast iron and whatnot, a little bit further down, that we'll incorporate into part 3 from Latrobe General Cemetery. Down in this corner of the old cemetery, there's a few cast iron railings around around grave sites. So let's get in and have a look at them. This one's in loving memory of Alan Clark, August the 9th, 1902, 76, who passed not long after his good lady wife, Margaret, in April 1901, aged 81. Of an age difference for the times, but not unusual. Another grave that would have been quite impressive in its day. It's got the cast iron surrounds with the spear points on the corners. This one's a little bit fractured and been rebuilt, originally for Hedley Nichols, who passed away in 1899 as a 30-year-old, or as they put it, in the 30th year of his age. And then ECA Nichols, 1901, on Christmas Day, as a 68-year-old, and his good lady wife, Charlotte Sophia, who passed away 8 years later in 1909. As a 76-year-old. Yeah. These ones where the lady and the gentleman's hands reach together at the top of the memorial. This one's in memory, loving memory of Jane, who was a 62-year-old in 1898. And then her husband Matthew in 1906. And also Jess, beloved daughter of the above, in 1904 as a 35-year-old. People just didn't last as long in those days. A cross missing from the top of this one by the look of it. But we have the hand and the scroll. And this is in loving memory of Rachel Alday, wife of the Reverend T. Alday. She was 28. Got that smell of childbirth about it, 1895. Simpler piece here. Elijah Hedditch, aged 81, and Sarah Hedditch, who was 89. And there was 13 years between them, 1896 to 1909. Nice simple headstone. Now this one's definitely the pre-antibiotic era. Nice little carving there on the top. So William Dick, 71-year-old in 1917. His wife passed in 1897 as a 51-year-old. But also William, son of the above, 15-year-old in 1903. And then Ellen, daughter of the above, in 1874 as a 2-year-old. United in death, indeed. You can see the very nice fleur-de-lis cast iron surroundings. Serious cast iron work here, but no headstone and no names. Shame. Another nameless one, but with the same cast iron work. Some fancy work underneath the joints there. A whole other society, really. Because you've got Philip Lionel, who's the son of John and Alice, who was a 20-year-old in 1908. And his brother Henry, husband of Bessie, a 23-year-old in 1909. And then Elizabeth Hartley, aunt of the above, got the 64. And John Hartley Chamberlain, the senator, in 1953. He was interred at Ulverston. But he got the 68. People just carried so much suffering. And speaking of suffering, this one, fortunately, even though it's fallen over, has been placed so we can read it. And it's my dear wife Harriet French, passed away on the 9th of February 1910, aged 76. A life made beautiful by kindly deeds, a heart so generous for others' needs, a presence making sunshine where she trod, home with the happy resting now with God. Bit of a forced rhyme at the end there, but it works. It's a nice piece of marble. Now this one's on an angle, but still upright. And it's sacred to the memory of Grace Victoria, dearly loved daughter of A.H. and M.A. Young, who died at Latrobe in 1911, aged 19 years and 7 months. Some serious cast iron work around the grave site. On the southern side, Adolphus Henry, who was beloved husband of Mary Ann Young, 1902 I believe that says. And on the northern face, Mary Ann, beloved wife of A.H. Young, 1948 as an 84-year-old. That was a good run. Another stone that's fallen. This is for Elizabeth J. Dunn, beloved wife of Walter. She passed away in 1911, age 50. And then Walter hung on until 1946 as an 89-year-old. Hell of a separation. This is one of the later ones with the wrought iron, but it's well kept, and you'll see as we go up to the stone. So this is in loving memory of Margaret Sophia Aitken, wife of Robert Allen. She died in 1914 as a 41-year-old. And then Robert hung on until 1961 as an 86-year-old. It's a long time. There's an awful lot of wives going early in this section. This is Ethel Smith, beloved wife of Joseph. She departed in 1914, aged 33. No sign of Joseph here. Bit more cast iron. And what appears to be a granite block, which is wearing away but still legible. That's Michael L. Habel, 1896, as an 81-year-old, and Mary Ann Miles, daughter of the above, is a 40-year-old or 49-year-old in 1898. And then Catherine, who was the wife of Michael, I'm imagining, 2nd of May 1911, as an 88-year-old. It's a nice simple piece, still standing. Same sort of stone, but with what I assume is a Bible there, to a Louis Abel, who fell asleep in Jesus on December the 21st, 1888. The rest of it's fairly illegible, and quite a high cast iron surrounding here for what's something a little bit more usual for these days. Joseph Lobley passed away in 1888 as a 61-year-old. 2 years later, his wife Sarah as a 66-year-old. And then Thomas Hosford, I imagine he's some relation to Zara perhaps, but he was in 1906 as an 88-year-old. Depending on the quality of the stone and the time it's been up, you get a bit more wear here. This is William Norris, 1892, 72, but then the rest of it becomes a little bit illegible. A little bit unusual with the artificial logs around the headstone here. It's for Arthur Thomas Bartley, 1895, as a 60-year-old, so born in 1835. It's a long time ago. Now a whole series of small cast iron surrounded graves, but with no headstones or markings, but definitely spottable, the surroundings. Now this one's been repieced together. It's had a bit of a fall by the look of it. It's for William Carpenter, who died in 1900, I think, that says, as a 46-year-old. Then his wife, who had passed in 1897 as a 39-year-old. And their daughter on the 15th of June 1897 as a 5-month-old. So what's that? A week before her mother passed. And also Joseph, son of the above, who died at 8 months in what appears to be 1896 or 1886 maybe. Wow. There's a name you don't see often these days. Betsy Tuxworth, beloved wife of John. 1898 as a 63-year-old. Another one back to the 1860s. 1830s rather. 1835 again. Okay. Joseph Albert, dearly beloved husband of horizontal S. Wilmot, born 1889, died 1960. And then horizontal herself, 1892 to 67. And Dolly, May and Joseph, beloved children of the above, must have been twins, who passed away aged 3 months. Another one of the husband and wife motifs. Unfortunately, only the husband's here. And the rest of the stones up there. One Charles Forrester, 1890, as a 36-year-old. I'm not real sure of the rest of the words there, they're difficult to see at this stage. So we have what appears to be the top of the monument sitting there in front of it. There's the rest of it, quite an impressive piece of stonework. Zoom in, we can see that's in loving memory of our beloved mother, Mary Margaret, who fell asleep on the 1st of July 1890 as a 47-year-old. And the husband, the beloved father of the kids, I guess, Philip James Marchant, 7th of August 1910. 20 years without her. So he would have been 43 when she bundied off. She was 47. This is another one of those painful child ones. Nice dove there though, holding olive leaves, I guess, as a sign of peace. Elizabeth Laura, infant daughter of George and Emily Banfield, fell asleep in Jesus the 12th of January 1890, aged 3 months. Ah, dear. Ida Agnes Gower, 12th of December 1919, aged 12. After having lived through the First World War, and her parents as well, obviously, to then lose her 12-year-old not long after it was over. Another granite headstone, I believe. Herbert Gregg, youngest son of Michael and Mary Bloomhall, October 13, 1895, as a 5-year-old. A granite piece and another painful one. Ernest J. Broomhall, died December 12, 1894, aged 18. Obviously some connection to Herbert next door. And in with Mum. You can tell it's later because of the shield shape, which started coming in the 20s from what I've seen. This is Isabel, who was the wife of Richard Blumenthal. December 25, Christmas Day, 1926. It's a 77-year-old. Well, we do appear to be on a bit of an unpleasant run here at this part of the cemetery. Edward Ramsay, December the 5th, 1893, is aged 7 years and 6 months. And then Clifford Ramsay, born the 31st of July, 1887, then left on August the 13th, 1901. Oh golly, people carried some weight. And some impressive cast iron work, but unfortunately everything has worn away on the stone. Some seriously heavy duty cast iron work, very impressive. Same stone I'm calling granite, but I may well be wrong. This is for Jonathan Graham, 1905, as a 75-year-old, and Hannah, wife of the above, December the 23rd, 1906, aged 83. Again, some interesting cast iron work. This is a headstone to restore your faith in the healthiness of humanity. David Robertson, 1906, is a 93-year-old, and Margaret, in 1903, is a 90-year-old. People still made it. Bit of a variation on the theme here with a hand lifting the veil. That's for Alexander Robertson, 1907, as a 73-year-old. It was in January, and then his wife left in May 1907 as a 64-year-old. More interesting cast iron work. And this is to the loving memory of Kenneth Henry, youngest son of F.L. and W.H. Keane. Died August 29, 1906, as a 5-year-old. Other male and female hand clasp, and probably a cross missing from the top. This is in memory of Joseph Rawson, 1905, as a 68-year-old, and his good lady wife in 1932 as an 86-year-old. And then rather a long quote from Hebrews 10:11 to 29. Let you look that up if you're interested. And that's where we'll call an end to this trip round the Latrobe General Cemetery. There are others born in the 20s, buried in the 20s, 30s and 40s. But it's the earlier ones I really like that show much about the early times in the town. In the Stanley Cemetery today, back in the Northwest. Last three videos were in the Midlands during the first couple of days of our first heat wave of the summer. Much cooler, much more pleasant here today. Let's get into it. Let's give you a bit of a scan. It's a lot of smaller, closer together pieces of grave furniture. Cemetery was opened in 1828. You can see here it's dominated by, like everything else in Stanley, by the nut. We kick off with Thomas Hanlon, 28th of January 1931, as a 60-year-old. Very simple, quite dignified. From what I can tell through the lichen, this is Mark Allen Hanlon, born in 1870. Made it through to 1961, which is an interesting fact because that's the year I was born. What a link. This is in loving memory of Albert Henry Lumsden, 1959. And in front, there's a little, I guess it's an urn to Violet. Maybe that's some relation, I'm assuming. And next to Henry is Mary Elizabeth, 1935. Possibly wife, possibly daughter. Not a lot of detail on these ones. And this is James J. Lumsden, 7th of September 35, 9 months old. Possibly related to Mary, who may have passed because of childbirth complications, and then James followed her. Couple here for the Medwins. We'll start with the one on the right. This is for Mary, beloved wife of Matthias Medwin, died at Black River on the 28th of July 1881 as a 42-year-old. Words cannot find to tell you what I think what a good wife ought to be, and she was that. The left have Thomas Medwin, accidentally killed by a tree on October 26th, 1887, what appears to be as a 17-year-old. Yeah, it's the tragic ending to Seven Little Australians, the novel, where the eldest girl gets her back broken by a fallen tree. Definitely on the coast here, with the rusting of the cast iron. There does appear to be some headstones missing, but we have here a very impressive piece of marble. This is sacred to the memory of John Hanlon, 40-year-old who passed in 1874, and Catherine, who passed in 1907, aged 63. A father fond, a mother dear, you are not dead but sleeping here. They were not ours but God's alone, who loved them best and called them home. And then Daniel, son of the above, 22nd of June 1935, as a 72-year-old. That's the order of things that should occur. A couple here that are unmarked, so we'll move on. As you can see from this shot, we are right on the beach. Okay, so Gloria in Excelsis Deo, glory to the something or other of God. This one's well maintained, at least the top half. This stone was erected by Thomas Carroll of Athy, County Kildare, Ireland, in memory of his beloved wife Agnes. 13th of January 1845 as a 42-year-old. So she goes back to 1803 or thereabouts. And just to the north of that, we have one where the cross has fallen. But this is Thomas Carroll, probably some descendant of theirs, I suspect. 73 years old in 1920, so you go back to the 1840s, possibly. And next door to him is Charlotte Carroll, who died in 1936. I'm guessing that's his missus. And while we're on the subject of Carrolls, this is for Dennis, 1910 as an 80-year-old. Not a bad run today, even. Plot next door is unmarked. Okay, so this is Elizabeth Carroll, born Queens County Island, which is now County Offaly. She died in Stanley in May 1924. And this is Patrick Andrew Carroll, again born Queens County Island, so County Offaly. Died in Stanley in September 1935. It's good to remember where you're from, I guess. And another Carroll made it to 80. Surprisingly called Patrick. And his good lady wife Ellen, who made it to 74. As I say, the cast iron here does suffer from its closeness to the ocean. But another fine monument. But with so many Carrolls about, I guess it was bound to happen. This is Henry Michael Carroll, who died in 1880 as a 16-year-old. This one has unfortunately been worn completely away, but the one behind has not. Another Carroll, young John, died in 1902 from County Kildare. More evidence of the closeness to the ocean, the effect of salt water on cast iron. We have Colin here, Colin Wells, who passed away in 1961, and his wife 9 years later in 1970. He was 70 and she was 75. Bit difficult to read this, but also Ellen Banks, granddaughter of Colin and Mildred, who was 28 in 1979 when she passed away. Shame. And Jeffrey Ward Wells, who was a pharmacist, 62. And Dorothy, his wife, who died in 2020 as a 96-year-old. Wow. This would have been impressive in its day before it got worn away. From what I can read, it's commemorating Hugh MacDonald MacLean, Esquire, so he must have been a landholder in these parts. Bit of a mixing pot from the UK. I would imagine MacLean was of Scottish descent. We have here Edward Ruffles, born at Suffolk, England, 1838, and then passed away in Stanley in 1909. It was worn, but I think we can read it. Eliza Helena, beloved wife of Howard Elwell Drew, who died at St Paul's Parsonage, Stanley, on Sunday, the 29th of January, 1871, aged 32. Something infant children, William Alfred Ernest and Eliza. Not sure what happened there. We have William Staghouse Smith, who died at 83 in 1937. And Alfred House Smith died in 1897, aged 49. Okay, and John Smith, 1852, aged 55. There's some connections there. And Susanna, 1887, aged 76. Now, this is a big one, a bit like that one in Oatlands. the generations on it, but we'll go through this. This is in memory of Robert Kay, 1862, as a 61-year-old. And then his relict, that's an old archaic word for widow, 1864, age 56. And then we get into the meat of it. James Ferguson, 1877, as an 86-year-old. We'll have George, infant son, who died at 1. Georgina, infant daughter, who passed away at 7 days. And then we got George, father of the above children, 1884, as a 52-year-old. And Jane, wife of George, 61 in 1902. And then Annie Mariah, I guess that'd be pronounced in those days, wife of Henry John Austen. No date for Annie. And Jane Kay, 1939, rather, as a 73-year-old. So you get the full swing. And as befits a grave of this size, quite impressive cast iron work, but it too is suffering from the closeness of the ocean. This was erected by Ellen in loving memory of her beloved son James Lawrence. So died as a 38-year-old in 1899, which would have been quite painful, after she'd already put one up for her husband, named James Cole as well, who died in 1891, so 8 years earlier, in his 72nd year. Finally Ellen herself, 1911, as a 73-year-old. Nice that they're all still together. So we have a series of 3 markers here, all relating to the surname Burke, with a nice view of the beach over the back there. And we'll start with the southern one first. This is Violet, beloved wife of Michael Burke, 1911, as a 26-year-old. Now this is on the southern face of that stone. It's Michael himself. Died at Lancefield, 1921, aged 41. This one is Lillian, beloved wife of Charles Burke. South Forest, on the 5th of July 1924, as a 47-year-old, not long lived. We have Michael Burke, 3rd of January 1908, as a 71-year-old. And the 3rd of January, and then less than 2 months later, Francis, son of the above, aged 28. That's a bit painful. And just off to the side of those, we have Sarah Burke, who was wife of Michael. She died in 31, quite a few number of years after he, who passed in 1908. And she was 86. And there she rests. Another group of 3 here, these are the Martins. You start off with Winfred, wife of Patrick, 1886, as a 52-year-old. Michael, March 1856, as a 56-year-old. And his good lady wife Anne, 1868, as a 53-year-old. And finally Annie Alford, nee Martin, 1900, as a 35-year-old. Not long livers. We have Michael Brahenty, passed at Black River in 1885 as a 34-year-old, I think. And then his wife, Bridget, who died in Geelong, 1900, 15 years later. Yeah. So maybe he wasn't 34, he was 54. She was aged 65. Now this is an impressive piece of monumentary work for Agnes Laurie, beloved wife of W.B. Collins, 23rd of April, 1895, as a 27-year-old. That's a little bit of poetry about God and whatnot. But still, the cast iron, and again it's wearing, And then you get this, Mary Ann, wife of the late John Ferguson, 8th of January 1917, as an 86-year-old. Said a 60-year difference. Nearly 60 years difference, side by side. Another impressive piece of masonry. The carving there with the ivy on the cross. And so this is in loving memory, we get there, of Ellen, wife of Patrick, who passed in 1895 at 56. And round this face, we have Patrick. 1902 as a 68-year-old. And it too would have had fairly impressive cast iron railings. Other impressive monument that's still easy to read. So this is Thomas Braheny, 21st of October, 1892. And his good lady wife 3 years later, 2.5 years later. It's a 49-year-old. Hard climate here, hard life. He's a standard Irish immigrant, and Levings, or Longford, I'm not sure if that's County Longford or Longford Town, in 1843. She got out, well, maybe she got out after the famine, who knows. But she did make it through to 1925, so a good run once she got here. Another nicely carved piece of marble in memory of Kathleen Mary Holstein, beloved wife of A.A. Holstein, who died in Burnie, 1911. And in loving memory of Luke, husband of Annie Medwin, 1940. And then in loving memory of Annie Medwin, mother of Leighton, Alan, Kathleen and Lila. She passed in 1942. Quite a draining experience today for some reason. So we'll call that the end of part one. Probably end up being at least a 3-part of this one. Well, here we are back at Stanley Cemetery, underneath the ever-present nut. Up in the top southeastern corner, and we've done the northwestern in our last video, which I'll link at the end, and so we'll work our way through them all. Clearly the more recent end up here, this was Thomas John Spinks in 1945, Davidson in 52, behind Lucy we have Edward Davidson in 1938, so we might walk around and see if we can find the older ones. Okay, as we've seen from other cemeteries, the crest shape was introduced in the 20s and popular through the 30s as well. This is Charles L.C. Smith, accidentally killed in 1936, the 28-year-old. Lots of accidents. Next door we have Charlotte Amelia Tatlow, age 54 in 1934. We're starting to reach back a little bit further. We'll notice this white material smeared about. Looks very much like penguin scats. And as we are just above a penguin colony, that's not surprising. As we can see here, the cast iron is still around in the older graves. This is an interesting one. Sad. Frederick Wells, who died suddenly at Woolnorth, which was one of the original Van Diemen's Land Company holdings. 30th of November 1909. Died suddenly at Woolnorth then, and was erected by his affectionate brothers. Nice. More cast iron, but no headstone, so it's difficult to know. Now this is some heavy duty cast iron. Put my hand in to give you some idea of the scale. It's got some depth to it. Quite an impressive piece of marble. Loving memory of Frederick William Smith, 1910, as a 56-year-old, and Jane Edith Cartledge, daughter of the above and beloved wife of Edgar Cartledge, died at Smithton, which isn't that far from here, aged 35 in 1915. And we continue the impressive cast iron on this next grave. Sizable piece, this one. This is for Maud Ethel Leggett, only daughter of Captain Richard and Margaret Leggett, who died in 1911 as a 35-year-old. And also Margaret, mother of the above, who was born in Enniskillen in Ireland on the 2nd of October 1843. Died in 1916. And then down the bottom we have Captain Richard Leggett, Master Mariner, born Littleholm Park, maybe? It's hard to tell, but the markings there, in Sussex in England in 1841. Died in 1834, a pioneer of Melbourne's shipping. As we continue back in time, we get more of these. Ernest Carr Borrowdale died as a 27-year-old in 1908. No cause of death given. Another large lump of marble, loving memory of Emily, dearly beloved wife of William Walters, a 32-year-old in 1907. This is the first one I've ever come across in wood. I just cannot make out the lettering, but you can tell from the image at the top there that it's probably a nautical person. This is a rough one. Ivan Medwin, 1st of September 1892, 1 year and 3 months. And then Leonard, 28th of February 1903, aged 10 months. I don't know how people carried on. As you can probably see from the previous video on penguins in Burnie, I managed to get one in the infrared. They like to live in crevices under rocks, and they leave droppings out the front. So this is what we've found next to those two kids. Scat. And then an entrance in under a slab. So I suspect there's penguins under there. They hibernate during the day. Really impressive piece of marble with some impressive cast iron as well. This is in memory of Mary Bromley, wife of Wilfred Brown of Poverty Bay, New Zealand. I assume, not sure who that is. Age 28. And if you look up a little bit higher, it's in the little wreath there, it says 1893. Okay, so this one's come down off the plinth there, and it's in loving memory of Maria Edwards, daughter of the late John Edwards. She died in 1900 as a 54-year-old. Gone but not forgotten. What wonderful words. And some relative, I would imagine, Kathleen M. Edwards, January 1894. Very simple but very well proportioned piece of marble. More variations on your cast iron, and again well rusted. This is Sarah Elizabeth Wayne, 27th of April 1855 to 23rd of February 1890, so just short of 45. Another variation on the cast iron. This is cast iron and concrete, but unfortunately the really impressive slab of marble is unreadable. Let's have a look at the ones behind. They too have some cast iron. But before we get there, on the way past, I found the mortal remains of Andrew Murray, surgeon. Died 1854, aged 35. I've got a few more Edwards here. This is for Emily Johnson, which I know isn't an Edwards, but we'll get there. Emily Johnson, who died in Melbourne in 1920 as a 44-year-old. But next on the same plot is John Edwards, who died at Stanley in 1907. Another gone but not forgotten. Oh, nice sentiment. And also his wife, Emily Maria Edwards, who died at Stanley also in 1935. She outlived him by a way. Clearly some adornment missing from the top of this one. It does appear to be in sandstone, and thankfully it's legible. So this is Anthony Tatlow, who died at Circular Head 1885 as a 52-year-old, and his granddaughter Dora, who died in 1894 as a 6-year-old. And then underneath it redoes it in bronze, so if the sandstone ever wears away. He's had a tough time of it. Harold Anthony Tatlow, who died at 4 years and 3 months in 1888. Next to Harold, we've got Henrietta, the loved wife of Charles. She died in 1899 as a 41-year-old. It was tough for people. And yet, as always, it was a lottery. But Elizabeth Harmon here, who lived to 92. So there's no rhyme nor reason to it. Bit more heavy duty cast iron here. Very impressive piece of marble this, for Matthias Medwin, native of Buckinghamshire, England, who died at South Burney in 1898. A faithful father, true and kind, he proved to be in heart and mind. A loving father too as well, when he on earth with us did dwell. There you go. More cast iron here, and more sadness. Thomas, 1876, aged 1 hour. Struth. Andrew Earl, 1885, aged 4 months and 10 days. Philip Earl, 1888, 6 months and 11 days. I just don't comprehend how people could deal with so much grief. And more cast iron, so we know we're in the older part. This is a truly impressive piece of marble. You get to the top there before we come back down. Susan Eliza, beloved wife of Walter Higgs, January the 4th, 1893, as a 33-year-old. Got to think a lot of these women died in childbirth or complications from. So that's Stanley Cemetery, one of the earliest ones here in the Northwest. Over the ocean there, and between the edge of the cliff there at the edge of the cemetery and the water is the penguin colony. And as we've seen, it wanders up here. It's a cemetery worth a visit. And off to our left is what appears to be the original cemetery. So let's go and have a squeeze. This is the Jenner Street Cemetery in the Waratah Wynyard Council area. It's one of the older cemeteries in these parts of the world. Established in 1854, maybe 55, on an acre of land as a general cemetery for Wynyard. It was in use until 1927. So let's go and have a bit of a wander. Now these are quite aged. Can't actually read it, which is a problem. But we'll have a look at some more. There you go. According to the council, it was closed in 1927. And here's someone who was buried in 1930. Mary Elizabeth Kelly. It's very troublesome, the Irish, more likely than not to break rules. It's a heritage I'm proud of. Definitely a need for some heritage work to be done here. Not sure if you can read that, but that's Joseph Thunder, who died January the 11th, 1903 at 64. and his good lady wife, I believe, Mary Ann Thunder, who lived on until 1921, and she died at 57. It's a very old headstone, and with a lot of these things, particularly with the trees and whatnot growing, things move. At least it's all together. See what I mean by things moving. Celtic cross, the IHS of Catholicism, Mary Agatha Medwin, 53-year-old who died in 21. And then Joseph, who was 76, who died 20 years later. And so they must have opened it up so that he could be with his missus. Nice. The age differences in these older cemeteries, there's more of a spread of the ages, I guess would be a better way of putting it. There's Patrick Cullen, who died in Christmas Day 1900 as a 38-year-old. That'd ruin your Christmases for good. George Henry Lyons on the 14th of January 1914. There's too much missing to know how old he was, but from the size of the grave, not very. Comparison for you to see how small his grave is. Henry Medwin here, 63 and 22. Also his daughter, who died at the age of 2.5. It's, And then the missus, I think, who died in 37 as a 72-year-old. Impressive structure. Okay, so we've got, in the memory of Thomas Brewster, died the 28th of September 1887 as a 23-year-old. And then Albert J. Brewster, accidentally killed on the 30th of October 1909 as a 13-year-old. I guess you're going to find sadness in cemeteries. Cast iron surrounds are quite impressive, and I'm sure there was something else on top of that grave marker, probably a cross, I would imagine. See, at the top there's the broken Celtic cross, just below is the Harp of Ireland, all the shamrocks, and this is in memory of John Fleming, who was a native, and I'm not going to even try to pronounce that word, town in Limerick, who died on the 27th of January 1861 as a 55-year-old. And his good lady wife, Mary Fleming, née Begley, died on the 2nd of February 1868 as a 63-year-old. And their son Patrick, accidentally killed by a falling tree on the 16th of December 1865, age 16. That's those widowmaker trees I was telling you about. And their daughter, Nora, daughter of Lawrence Fleming, 30th of June as an 11-year-old. And their grandson Daniel Patrick, son of Lawrence Fleming, accidentally shot by his companion on the 22nd of October 1876. Wow, and then John Fleming, John Charles, son of Henry Fleming, who died on the 19th of February 1890 as a 17-year-old. There's just so much tragedy in one spot. Wow. This is the Joyces, but very little to tell us any more. Now this is a curious one. In loving memory of Thomas Carroll, also Hester, wife of the above, and Hester Strong, daughter of the above, and her infant son Cecil. But no date. All very odd. If you had the money in the old days, you could put up a hell of a monument. This is sacred to the memory of Arthur, husband of Mary Main, who was 86 in 1887 when he died. Mary was 80 when she passed in 96. and their son lived to be 67. That's the way it's supposed to go, I reckon. Another grave here with the cast iron surrounds, but no markers. Appears to be full size. Another one where the top's missing. Probably a crucifix, or at least a cross. That's Thomas Farrell, who was 80 in 1911 by the look of it. And Ellen, daughter of the above, who died in 1924 at 65. Now this is a nice one. In loving memory of Bridget, the beloved wife of Thomas Brewster. Bridget passed on the 20th of December 1908 at 79. Sweetheart of Mary, be my salvation, so obviously Catholic. Also Thomas Brewster, the fellow mentioned above, beloved husband of the above, who died on August the 17th, 1912 as an 88-year-old. It's just a sweet sentiment to it. It's nicely laid out. Some impressive cast iron as well. Looking very nice. Section of children's graves here. We'll just pass on and let them be. This is to the memory of Peter Cameron, loving husband of Janet and father of Bert, Bill, Irk, Amy, Tel, Jack, May, Et, Len, Gavin and Jean. Just the 11. So he didn't live that long, but he fitted a lot in. This is another one of those where there's a huge difference in years between deaths. So we got William Dart, passed away in 1921 as a 51-year-old, and Emma Dart, who passed away in July 1960, aged 91. That's 39 years afterwards. And it wouldn't be a graveyard that didn't include an Anzac. 11861, Private Alfred Henry George Rogers, 3 Field Ambulance. He was only 24 when he passed away in 1921. And diagonally opposite him is 355, that's one of the very early ones. Lieutenant Arthur Montgomery of the 12th. What I remember of the 12th, they were half Tasmanian, a quarter South Australian and a quarter WA. And they went in at Gallipoli and served in the Western Front. So he was there for a long time, to come home and be accidentally killed in 1928. This part is perhaps more subject to land movement than the other parts. A lot of the headstones are at angles, but we'll go for a wander. Nice simple one. Charles William French, beloved husband of Ellen Maybelle French, passed away the 2nd of August 1925, at rest as a 72-year-old. 2871, Private Clarence Begent Muir, 26 Battalion. Only made it to November 1925. It really did knock people about. 140, Private Albert Hartman, 40th Battalion, who died on the 4th of September 1919. Made it through the war and then died not long after. There is no there's no justice in the world. There's no order to it. It just happens, I guess. And there's an interesting little plaque on the bottom of Private Harman's grave. More still here, but with no markers on them. Iron surrounds. Elizabeth Polk, who died at Cooee, which is now a suburb of Burnie, on the 7th of April 1919 as a 68-year-old. I assume that's her husband Luke, who died on the 28th of January 1928, 77. He couldn't survive long without her either. But a hell of an impressive lump of marble. Then a little monument still quite charming in its own little way. George Austin, who died in 1918, is a 41-year-old. And then Catherine, who joined him in 1934. She doesn't have an age there. So W.D. Hamilton, who died in 1923, and his Mrs. E.H. Hamilton, who died in 1917. And two sons killed in France 1916. Thy will be done. It seems to have affected both of them, both parents obviously, to lose two sons. Frances Ethel Ross Sams, who died on the 27th of March 1917, 54 years old, and George Gardner Sams, killed in France on the 3rd of September 1916. 29, yeah, not one of the young ones. And then Herbert, who passed at Woodstock, which is our property, 1936. The Great War hit these towns so hard. And this one's very well maintained, repainted and everything. Arthur Bramich, who born on the 8th of October 1837, died on the 18th of December 1914. And his good lady wife, Victoria Grace Bramich, 1839 to 1928. Good runs, both of them. It's interesting. We've got the old broken headstone here. It says Matthew Betham Docker, born Southport, England, August the 3rd, 1829, and who died the 12th of September 1915 as an 86-year-old. But above that, on the same grave, there's one that's been maintained. It's been a little while since the lettering was updated, but certainly much clearer to read than the broken headstone. Another three here, unmarked but well looked after. It's amazing the people that feel the need to say where they were born when it was a different country. So you got George Hewitt Sargent, born at Eyethorne, I assume that's how you pronounce it, Kent, in 1844 and died in 1914. And his good lady wife Elizabeth, who died in 24. And you can see the slab, the headstone there is on concrete. At the back there you can see where it was attached originally and upright. Another one of those nice ones, just simple, yet with a touch of the decorative about it. James, who passed in 1922 at 88, and his good lady wife Eliza, who passed in 28 at 93, at rest. Simple, elegant, comforting. And immediately next door is one that's less comforting. In loving memory of Maisie C., beloved daughter of G&A Reeve. Died on the 27th of May 1926 as a 9-year-old, and their infant son Murray, who died on the 1st of November 1914 at 4 months old. And Ada, beloved mother of the above, who died in 1935. Back with the kids. A couple of shields, a little bit hard to read. George, who was Mary's husband, October the 28th, 1898, 27 years. And then Mary, no, it can't be, I'd say wife, died at 1914, so 16 years later as a 38-year-old. Oh, yeah, 22, 27, yeah, that figures. Very sad. There you go, Susan Mackie Muir, who died at Wynyard, Tasmania, 1908, 81, and then William McGregor MacDonald Muir was 84 in 1910, and John Mackay Muir, son of the late Dr. Muir and grandson of the above, 1930 as a 30-year-old. Wow, it's a impressive piece of marble. Okay, so James Miller Mackay Muir, who gave his life for suffering humanity on August the 28th, 1926 as a 62-year-old. Erected by the Loyal Table Cape number 5, Myella number 35, Yolla number 39, International Order of Oddfellows, and Alexandra, I don't know what that is, UA, United Australian Oddfellow, who knows, and number 41 lodges, in recognition of his loving, faithful and skillful service, aged 34. That's at 1926. And then Jane, beloved wife of the above, 15th of February 1950 as an 86-year-old. It's a curious one. Jump onto Trove and see if I can find out what happened. Well, now then, got Dorcas Louisa, who is the beloved daughter of John and Eliza Lewis, who died as a 15-year-old in 1889. And also their daughter, Elizabeth Ann, who was also the wife of William Pardoe, who departed on the 5th of February 1890 as a 29-year-old. And William Pardoe, who bundied off in 1894 as a 54-year-old. And also the above John Lewis, that's Dorcas's father, who was drowned at the Great Barrier Island, New Zealand, at the wreckage of the SS Waipira on the 29th of October 1894. And Eliza Lewis, as mentioned above, who departed on the 6th of April 1895 as a 62-year-old. I'm going to have a bit of a dig around and see what I can find out about the Great Barrier Island, New Zealand, and the wreck of the SS Wairarapa. Wairarapa? Not sure, it's obviously a Maori word. Quite an impressive piece of grave furniture here, with the urn and the wreath with the urn and the shroud over the top, and fairly solid cast iron surrounding fences. Start off with Mary Ann, the beloved wife of Robert Quiggin of Terra Nova, New Land, 1874, aged 31 years old. And then below Mary Ann, we have Evelyn Mildred Toft, loved daughter of Clara and Alfred Toft. No dates. Moving off to the right, having memory of Anne, the beloved wife of the Honourable W. Moore, another one who died at Terra Nova. 67-year-old, so that's not a bad run in those days, in 1889. And then below that we have Clara Jane Toft, beloved daughter of Mary and Robert Quiggin, who died at Terra Nova 1918. And on the southern face we have Robert Quiggin, who died at Terra Nova Wynyard in 1906 as a 72-year-old. Keep them all together, I guess. As you can see, quite a sizable plot. Interesting carving work here, and this is an interesting one, unless you're the person involved, I guess. William Patterson, who was accidentally drowned by something or other, passing from the shore to the schooner Buscerne off Table Cape, November, maybe it says October 24, 1864, age 24. Another reason to go and dig out Trove and see what we can find on that story. If I find anything, I'll put a link at the end. I'll put a link in the description. And next to William's grave marker is another one that unfortunately has gone face down, so I'm unable to help with that. And you can see the effects of time on these things. There you have it, the old cemetery at Wynyard. Quite a lot more than I expected to find when I stumbled across it. Quite a lot in that cemetery. So good morning. Today we're off to have a look at a tiny little cemetery in a place called Somerset, between Wynyard and Burnie in the northwest. It's no longer in use, but there are still people here that are being remembered. So we'll stick to the older part and not infringe on anyone's privacy. As you can see, the older parts basically go uphill, of course. They're the ones with the cast iron surrounds. If we look over to the west, you can see they're more uniform and regular, which is a sign that they're newer. Okay, we're at the top of the cemetery now, and I'll just give you a view over that. You can see it starts here and then rides all the way down to the flat, and the older ones are on this cliff face, which is what it feels like anyway walking up. But pretty nice view for eternity. You can see there's bits of concrete and whatnot there, which may have been an older site. This one here has no headstone. This one though, Daisy Alice, beloved wife of Albert Diprose, died 6th of May 1909. It's a 23-year-old. She's probably childbirth, I guess, but I'm not going to leap to conclusions. And over the back you can see there's another one with the cast iron around it, but no headstone over there. Okay, as you can see from the anchor there, this is a nautical bent. Thomas David Lewis, Master Mariner, born at Haverford West in Wales in 1831. Died at Dayspring on the northwest coast of Tassie in 1899. And his good lady wife, Maria Elizabeth, who was born in London in 1825 and died in Melbourne in 1896. Quite a substantial piece of marble, some fairly heavy duty cast iron there too. Interesting pieces of iron around this one. Not a lot of headstonage, just this little piece, footstone sort of thing. It says 1909. One unfortunately has fallen off. It's mounting, but it's still in, no, it's not intact, but it's all complete. So Mary Clark, 1916, as a 75-year-old. It's always nice to see someone who actually lived a decent length of time in these old cemeteries. Again, no headstone. This is next to the 75-year-old lady. But some chains there in the surrounds. The footstones are just too worn away to be able to read. And you notice the footstones because that faces east. The idea was that on Judgment Day everyone would stand up and face the rising sun. It happens with these older cemeteries. This is Malcolm, only son of Walter and Alice Gardam, who died on July the 27th, 1909 at 11 weeks. The suffering people live with. Another couple of spots here, no markers, or maybe a foot marker here. We'll have a look. 1908, so an older one. but definitely no stones here, headstones, footstones, just the cast iron to mark where someone rests. Okay, so this is Catherine Ann, dearly beloved wife of Edward Cooper, from Ross Grange, which I assume is a property around these ways, this part. Late of Silchester, England. Died in 1913 as a 65-year-old, and then Edward in 1917 as a 72-year-old, which is, you know, seems reasonable. And then you look down the bottom here, in loving memory of our little son, Sydney Dare Cooper, aged 1 year and 9 months. Can't get a date on that one, but yeah, we have life so much easier. Moving back towards the eastern side, we have Arnell Graham Anderson, aged 9 months, and also Willie and Cliffy Clark, cousins of the above, but no mention of Willie or Cliffy's dates of passing, or how old they were. This is one of those ones with the hand pointing up we've seen in other cemeteries. This is James Clark, accidentally killed on the 28th of February 1912, aged 38. I'll have a look in Trove and see if I can find any info on that, and I'll put it in the description below. And here's a nice one, relatively I guess. Charles Wallace, 87, and Bridget Wallace, 73. Still together, very nice. So this is one of the earliest shield memorials I've ever seen. Maybe it was put up some years later, but so this is in memory of Alfred Joseph Hall, 10th of April 1887. As a 13-year-old. So what's that, 1874 he was born. It goes back a long way, this cemetery. There are people that hang on for a long time after their spouses go, and there's others that don't. This is a long, long gap. So Mary Elizabeth Ann Hall from First West Beach, died in 1902 in her 60th year. And Alfred, her husband, hung on till 1942 to die at 94. So she was 60, he would have been 54 the year she passed. That's a long time on your own. It does get painful. So this is Greta, beloved child of R and E.A. Dart. 1st of February 1909 as a 2-year-old. Yeah. Okay, this stone snapped, as you can see, but we'll go around the other side because it's an interesting read. So this is William Dart, who was born in North Taunton, Devonshire, and then died in Wynyard in 1896 as a 71-year-old. And then Naomi, and we go up to the top there. I'm not sure where she's from, but she passed in Wynyard in 1920, so 24 years later. Another early passing, Kenneth Bruce Mackenzie. Couldn't come up with a more Scottish name, I reckon. In 1922 as a 15-year-old, and you can see the cross down there that would have been sitting on top of the marker. And next to Kenneth is Erica Maud Mackenzie, who died on the 2nd of April 1921, aged 18. Wow. Then at the back we've got Major C.R. Mackenzie, who died at Woodburn August the 7th as a 48-year-old in 1857, and Rachel Roder, who died at Rose War in 1899. That's a fair time gap. And she got to 80. Another one of those horrible ones. Florence Gelton, who died the 14th of July 1889 as 11 years and 10 months. You can see the funeral urn there on the side that would have sat atop the furniture there. So this is in loving memory of Thomas Wilson, surgeon, who died in 1890 at Alterville, Table Cape. If we just ease across here, just out there between those trees, you can just peek out Table Cape in the distance. And then of course his beloved son Herman Archibald, who died on the 9th of August 1891 as almost a 21-year-old in Alterville, which is the name of the property, Hawthorne, Victoria. Impressive piece of marble. Imposing cast iron. Once again on the far eastern side, nothing on that footstone, and the headstone's gone. If we come down the hill a little, we come to James Hyland in 1893 as a 47-year-old, and his missus, I assume, oh no, father and mother of the above. Okay, he died in 1914. Frederick, and James passed in 1893, and then his wife in 1913. So 10-year gap, 20-year gap, 20-year gap. And then next to them, we have Lizzie Jasper Hyland, beloved wife of Frederick, who died in 1950. My God, that's 36 years after Frederick. Yeah, long run. Okay, this is Mary Ann, beloved wife of James Wallace Harnett, perhaps. 1924, age 64, and you can see it's more your standard grave furniture. And I'm assuming this is their son, Charles Allen Harnett, 17th of April 1919 as a 15-year-old. There doesn't seem to be a family that wasn't touched. So this is Thomas Ragg, accidentally drowned on the night of June 16th, 1901. There's a 78-year-old. I wonder what he was swimming in. But Ragg's, there's a street named after the Raggs in Somerset. And that was what, 1901. Next door we have Thomas Ragg, 1909. Emily Wright Ragg, 1919. Edith Ragg in 1875, aged 12. And I'm not sure about the last person there. Ethel May Ragg, 1875. Always good to find mostly intact older large pieces. So this was in loving memory of William Henry Pace, late Sub-Inspector of Police and loved husband of Charlotte Pace. He bundied off in 1934 as an 82-year-old. And you can see the hands there together, so possibly we might have, no, she's not here. Hang on a tick. And then Thomas Pace, late Sub-Inspector of Police, died the 2nd of April 1883, age 60. Must have been his dad, I guess. Or, yeah, or granddad perhaps. That one we just looked at was added. This was the original headstone for Thomas Pace in sandstone. By the look of it, it's starting to wear, but you can just see the dates there. So this is to the memory of William Hill, 25th of January 1903. His Mrs. Anne Hill, 1898, aged 80. But at the bottom, his eldest son died on the 14th of March 1903. Less than 2 months after his dad. Yeah. Nothing but the cast iron left there. And not even that on this one. There are a couple of foot stones, but as you can see, there's nothing on them. James Wallace Hartnett, 1913, aged 49. Which, you know, not good, but not bad either, I guess, given the times. So, Georgina, beloved wife of Alfred Hilda, 3rd of January 1907 as a 45-year-old. And then, just over a year later, her daughter, Ethel Margaret Hilda, as a 22-year-old. 1908, 1907, and then Alfred lived on till 1941, carrying that grief. A little bit interesting here. We have Jessie Emily Wells, beloved wife of Henry. She departed life on the 8th of January 1908 as a 58-year-old. And next door is Henry himself, who was a corporal in Company A of the 69th, I think that's Indian Infantry. If you know otherwise, please drop a comment below. From May the 11th, 1828 to January the 7th, 1912. That's a fair run. And here we have Nita, beloved daughter of Walter and Alice Bardham, I think. It's hard to tell. Died in 1915 as a 19-year-old. Possibly the flu, I guess, that being the time for that. No headstones or anything, but some artificial flowers in there, so maybe whoever is resting there still has relatives about. This is a big one, and this one just screams of grief. So Lawrence von Bibra accidentally drowned in 1906 as a 14-year-old. Then Francis von Bibra, beloved husband of H.M. She died in 1915 as a 77-year-old. And then, no, Francis, it's a he. And also Francis, beloved husband of H.M. von Bibra, who died in 1915, aged 77. And I don't know if you can make it out, but it says Harriet Maria, wife of the above. Died the 17th of March 1939, aged 93. In loving memory of Tasman, beloved husband of Emma von Bibra, who died on the 29th of June 1918, aged 47 maybe. Also their infant son Lewis, who died in 1911. Tells you how things have changed over the years. Now this is Sybil Julia Knight, beloved wife of Alfred, who died in 1900, aged 17 years. Wow. So this is May Bertha, beloved wife of Alfred, who died as a 24-year-old in 1901. And then her brother Joseph James Goodall in 1914 as a 38-year-old. Big brother, eh? So we got the cast iron again. Reasonable lump of marble with some vine work around the edges. This is James Boscall, 1905 as a 75-year-old. So what is that, 1830? And his good lady wife Emily, who died in 1926 as an 81-year-old. Yeah. Okay, so Lewis Shepherd on the 27th of November 1913 as a 53-year-old. And then his wife within 3 months as a 43-year-old. Horrendous. Okay, so this is in memory of Frank Bugg, who died on the 17th of December 1906, aged 15 years and 11 months. And then there's William, who passed away 1929. I'm assuming that's his dad. And next door we have Rebecca. I'm assuming is his mother. She lived until 1950. It's an awful lot of grief to carry. So that about wraps up Somerset Cemetery. You can see over the shoulder there. There's a lot more from about the 1920s on. But as I say, a lot of these are still being tended, so I'll give them a miss.